If you're worried about the role of technology in our lives in the future, you might be concerned about video games. Worldwide, people spend billions of hours per week playing them. But if you think that's a colossal waste of time, then you haven't met computer scientist Adrian Troy. He wants to make all that time and energy we spend on video games count. He believes that in the future, our obsession with them could help solve some of the world's biggest problems.
Think about Angry Birds. People play that game 3 million hours a day. If we can produce a game that benefits society with that level of engagement, we could change the world in a week.
But how do you make a video game that benefits humanity? Ask Adrian. He's already done it. Twice. His games could bring us closer to curing diseases like cancer and HIV. And the people playing them aren't scientists. The Carnegie Mellon professor harnesses the brain power of the millions of people who play video games to solve biological mysteries. It's a concept called crowdsourcing, putting the crowd to use.
It's allowed us to organize humanity in ways that were never before possible. And I think we've just scratched the surface.
Adrian has always loved games.
A game is very much like a science, and there's rules and there's physics that you have to obey. But it's also like this art. Okay, so the rule is everything you say is a rule.
He's been inventing them since he was little.
When I was 12 and I had appendicitis, I started inventing card games. Since then, it's just like if you're bored, you invent a game. That's really fun.
He invents games everywhere, even at the local diner.
Being like, the sugars are the board, and I'm like, you're the Tabasco sauce, I'm the salt. Our job is to get the pepper. You can only move like this.
And he thinks about games 24/7, from his sleeping to his waking hours.
I always have this notebook with me. When you're writing, you're like taking stuff out of your brain, and sometimes you just need like a little bit of extra space.
Adrian's first science video game began when biochemists had a problem. To fight diseases, they needed help solving protein puzzles. Computers are terrible at visual puzzles, but humans are great at them. So where could Adrian find a massive workforce? What if he could get the millions of people playing video games to play a different kind of game?
And that was the beginning of Foldit. It's a 3D puzzle.
Instead of birds and bombs, this game would be about protein folding. Proteins are molecules made up of long chains of amino acids. They're the workhorses of our cells, the machinery that keeps our body running. And they fold in thousands of different ways.
It's like all the pieces of the protein locked together in this sort of puzzle, like Tetris.
How they fold will change what they do in your body.
Depending on how they fold, they can either form the fibers in your hair or the motors that run your muscles.
A misfolded protein can help HIV replicate and cause diseases like cancer. But a well-folded one can help cure diseases. In the lab, scientists can make the long chains of amino acids, but when it comes to folding them up properly, they have trouble. And that's where people playing Foldit come in.
Fundamentally, Foldit is a game where we use people to help us understand how to build these molecules to build next generation cures.
Adrian labored over how to get people to play. He made proteins a toy.
So a game has rules, but a toy is just something you want to play with. Even if you didn't know the rules, you still want to just wiggle it around and see how it works.
Just like a Rubik's Cube, you can twist and turn it.
We see if they can intuit and fold a protein into that most stable shape just by looking at it and by thinking about it and by playing with it.
Adrian hoped the crowd could solve protein puzzles, but would the crowd show up? On May 8, 2008, they released Foldit to the world and waited.
The servers crashed within like 24 hours. The public played it, and they cared about it, and they understood it, and it was one of the greatest feelings of my life.
Foldit made history. And it isn't Angry Birds. With over 300,000 players, this game advances science.
It actually adds value to the world. Adrian has completely broken this mold. There are no elves in Fold It. There's no magic, there are no unicorns, and yet, people love it.
In 2011, Fold It players solved one of these puzzles in just 3 weeks. The riddle of a bad protein that helps HIV reproduce. Identifying that structure brings us closer to designing better treatments. So what kind of person plays a game about protein folding? Meet one of the top-ranked Fold It players in the world. He isn't a scientist. He's a 9th grader. Like most 15-year-olds, Michael Tate loves playing around.
I play Fold It as often as I can, and I stay on for hours and hours.
To boost your score, you have to follow the rules of protein folding. Make the protein compact and avoid empty spaces.
These red things are voids that I have to fill in, and I can add rubber bands that bring the protein closer together. And if you make the most hydrogen bonds between everything, you get the highest score.
We thought we'd have to hide the science behind this veneer of a game, and then it's almost like we'd punk them, you know, but it was the opposite.
Getting lectures from your teachers, I mean, that's boring, but if the students aren't having fun playing a game, oh my gosh.
There are thousands more like Michael, from architects to historians and bankers to organic farmers. They are the crowd. Adrian has always had an interest in crowds. It began early as a boy growing up in New York City.
I would stand on the windowsill when I was a little kid and just stare out my window.
Watching the flow of people from his window changed his view of crowds.
Here was the beating of a heart made of people.
The effect was so powerful that in grad school, he studied and simulated the patterns that crowds make.
It really did inspire me to think that large groups of people can be coordinated into sort of a dance that could very, very powerfully be harnessed for good.
Adrian did that with Fold It, but could he do it again? Biochemist Riju Das needed help with another puzzle, ribonucleic acid, or RNA. Once again, computers weren't able to solve the visual RNA folding puzzles. Riju thought people would be better and faster, and he knew exactly whom to call to assemble his workforce. Like proteins, RNA begins in a long chain.
And then self-assemble into these beautiful, complex shapes, like snowflake-like patterns.
Again, their shape determines what they do in our bodies, from forming the genetic code of some viruses to helping to create other molecules like proteins. So, if we can figure out how they're structured, we can fight diseases.
Understanding how RNAs work is critical for understanding life and for defeating diseases like AIDS and influenza.
With RNA, there was only one accurate way to tell if players assembled the puzzles properly: make the molecules in a real laboratory.
And we realized, oh wow, that's the game. When you hit submit, we're actually going to make the RNA and we're going to send you back the results. We're like, this is going to be so awesome. There's nothing else in the world like this.
Under Adrian's guidance, his graduate student, Ji Lee, transformed their vision into Eterna, a game that would be played by humans, scored by nature. People would be scored by how well their molecules folded in real life. In 2011, they launched Eterna.
It just came alive. It's as if someone had just flipped the switch and turned on New York City. And we were just like, I think we maybe did it.
In the lab, they synthesized the molecules the players designed. They look like stable shapes in the game, but would they fold like that in real life?
And they come back, and it's basically nothing. What happens when you create a game, you tell everyone, we're all going to do science together, and then nothing comes out?
None of the RNAs folded into stable shapes in the lab. Adrian worried Eterna was a bust. But what he didn't count on was the community. Eterna let the players see data on how their molecules had actually folded in the lab. The chat forums lit up.
They'd all start talking about data. They'd analyze it to pieces.
Hundreds of players were discussing their mistakes and revising their strategies.
It was like the very beginnings of science. It was almost like when alchemy was slowly turning into chemistry.
6 months in, they plotted the players' progress, and Adrian saw a change.
And it was just like, zing. The players have learned how to fold RNA. It was just like sent chills down our spine.
The players' RNA molecules were folding correctly.
And then I thought, wow, that's real science. And that's when I knew that it was going to work.
The worst player design was better than the best computer design. Humans were better and faster.
When you hire someone, you don't know whether they're going to be good or bad at the job. Well, we sort of hired the world, and the world turned out to be awesome.
Adrian has only 3 grad students.
I wonder if we're going to get better data.
But he has over 40,000 Eterna players who have discovered new rules for how RNA folds.
We simply have much more manpower than anyone else. And science is about manpower.
I think that it's possible that what we're seeing in Eterna is the tip of an enormously exciting iceberg. I don't know how large the largest problems that can be solved are if we all contribute our own little piece.
Adrian envisions a future where anyone and everyone can contribute to solving such huge problems. Even 15-year-olds like Michael Tate.
Maybe science is going to be like a team sport. And I don't mean like a 30-person team, I mean like a 30,000-person team. Take these crowds and multiply it by human creativity. We're dealing with a force way more powerful than anything we had before.